It appears as though my upload speed is so bad that I can't stream very well. When I try to stream me talking about things and then tacking on the Federalist Papers to the end of it just to fill it out, and because I think it's important that people talk about the Federalist Papers, because they pretty explicitly explain the founders' ideas and why they made the Constitution, so there isn't as much ambiguity as some people would like you to think. And since I don't hear people talking about them very often, I thought I would try to recite them. So at least maybe one or two people, if anybody ever watches this garbage, we'll get it out there. So I decided to put them all in just a video with some random nonsense in the background as a visual. So here you go. Here's the Federalist Papers. Enjoy. Federalist number 1. For the Independent Journal, Saturday, October 27th, 1787. To the people of the state of New York. After an unequivocal experience on the inefficacy of the subsisting federal government, you are called upon to deliberate on a new constitution for the United States of America. The subject speaks to its own importance, comprehending in its consequences nothing less than the existence of the Union, and the safety and welfare of the parts of which it is composed. The fate of an empire, in many respects the most interesting in the world. It has been frequently remarked that it seems to have been reserved for the people of this country, by their conduct and example, to decide the important question, whether societies of men really are capable or not of establishing good government from the reflection and choice, or whether they are forever destined to depend on their political constitutions on accident and force. If there be any truth in the remark, the crisis at which we have arrived may with propriety be regarded as an era in which that decision is to be made, and a wrong election on the part we shall act may, in this view, deserve to be considered as a general misfortune of mankind. This idea will add inducements of philanthropy to those of patriotism, to heighten the solicitude which all considerate and good men must feel for the event. Happy will it be if our choice should be directed by a judicious estimate of our true interests, unperplexed and unbiased by considerations not connected with the public good. But this is a thing more ardently to be wished for than seriously to be expected. The plan offered to our deliberations affects too many particular interests, innovates upon too many local institutions, not to involve in its discussion a variety of objects foreign to its merits, and of views, passions, and prejudices little favorable to the discovery of truth. Among the most formidable of the obstacles which the new Constitution will have to encounter may readily be distinguished the obvious interest of a certain class of men in every state to resist all changes which may hazard a diminution of their power, emolument and consequence of the offices they hold under the state establishments, and the perverted ambition of another class of men, who will either hope to aggrandize themselves by the confusions of their country, or will flatter themselves with the fairer prospects of elevation from the subdivision of the empire into several partial confederacies than from its union under one government. It is not, however, my design to dwell upon observations of this nature. I am well aware that it would be disingenuous to resolve indiscriminately the opposition of any set of men, merely because their situations might subject them to suspicion, into interested or ambitious views. Candor will oblige us to admit that even such men may be actuated by upright intentions, and it cannot be doubted that much of the opposition which has made its appearance, or may hereafter make its appearance, will spring from sources blameless at least, if not respectable, the honest errors of minds led astray by preconceived jealousies and fears. So numerous indeed, and so powerful are the causes which serve to give false bias in judgment, that we, upon many occasions, see wise and good men on the wrong as well as on the right side of questions of the first magnitude of society. The circumstance, if duly attended, would furnish a lesson of moderation to those who are ever so much persuaded of their being in the right of any controversy, and a further reason for caution in this respect might be drawn from the reflection that we are not always sure that those who advocate truth are influenced by purer principles than their antagonists. Ambition, avarice, personal animosity, party opposition, and many other motives not more laudable than these are apt to operate as well upon those who support those who oppose the right side of a question. Were there not even these inducements to moderation, nothing could be more ill-judged than that intolerant spirit which has at all times characterized political parties. For in politics, as in religion, it is equally absurd to aim at making proselytes by fire and sword. Heresies in either can rarely be cured by persecution. And yet, however just as these sentiments will be allowed to be, we have already sufficient indications that it will happen in this as in all former cases of great national discussion. A torrent of angry and malignant passions will be let loose. To judge from the conduct of the opposite parties, we should be led to conclude that they will mutually help to evince the justness of their opinions, and to increase the number of their converts by the loudness of their declamations and the bitterness of their invectives. An enlightened zeal for the energy and efficiency of government will be stigmatized as the offspring of a temper fond of despotic power, hostile to the principles of liberty. An over-scrupulous jealousy of danger to the rights of the people, which is more commonly the fault of the head than of the heart, will be represented as a more pretense than artifice, the stale bait for popularity at the expense of the public good. It will be forgotten, on the one hand, that jealousy is the usual concomitant of evil, and that the noble enthusiasm of liberty is apt to be infected with the spirit of narrow and illiberal distrust. On the other hand, it will be equally forgotten that the vigor of government is essential to the security of liberty, that in the contemplation of a sound and well-informed judgment, their interests can never be separated, and that a dangerous ambition more often lurks behind the suspicious mask of zeal for the rights of the people than under the forbidden appearance of zeal for the firmness and efficiency of government. History will teach us that the former has been found a much more certain road to the introduction of despotism than the latter, and that of those men who have overturned the liberties of republics, the greatest number have begun their career by paying an obsequious court to the people, commencing demagogues and ending tyrants. In the course of the preceding observation, I have had an eye, my fellow citizens, to putting you upon your guard against all attempts, for whatever quarter, to influence your decision in a matter of the utmost moment of your welfare, by any impressions other than those which may result from the evidence of truth. You will, no doubt, at the same time have collected from the general scope of them, that they proceed from a source not unfriendly to the new Constitution. Yes, my countrymen, I owe to you that, after having given it an attentive consideration, I am clearly of opinion it is in your interest to adopt it. I am convinced that this is the safest course for your liberty, your dignity, and your happiness. I affect not reserves which I do not feel. I will not amuse you with an appearance of deliberation when I have decided. I frankly acknowledge to you my convictions, and I will freely lay before you the reasons on which they are founded. My consciousness of good intentions disdains ambiguity. I shall not, however, multiply professions on this head. My motives must remain in the depository of my own breast. My arguments will be open to all, and may be judged of by all. They shall at least be offered in a spirit which shall not disgrace the cause of truth. I propose, in a series of papers, to discuss the following interesting particulars: the utility of the Union for your political prosperity, the insufficiency of the present Confederation to preserve that Union, the necessity of a government at least equally energetic with the one proposed, to the attainment of this object, the conformity of the proposed Constitution to the true principles of republican governments, its analogy to your own state convention, and lastly, the additional security which its adoption will afford to the preservation of that species of government, to liberty and to property. In the progress of this discussion, I shall endeavor to give a satisfactory answer to the objections which shall have made out their appearance, that may seem to have any claim to your attention. It may perhaps be thought superfluous to offer arguments to prove the utility of a union, a point, no doubt, deeply engraved on the hearts of the great body of the people in every state, and one which, it may be imagined, has no adversaries. But the fact is, we already hear it whispered in the private circles of those who oppose the new Constitution, that the 13 states are of too great extent for any general system, and that we must of necessity resort to separate confederacies of distinct portions of the whole. The doctrine will, in all probability, be gradually propagated till it has the votaries enough to countenance and open avowal of it, for nothing can be more evident to those who are able to take an enlarged view of the subject than the alternative of the adoption of the new Constitution or the dismemberment of the Union. It will therefore be of use to begin by examining the advantages of that Union, the certain evils, and the probable dangers to which every state will be exposed from its dissolution. This shall accordingly constitute the subject of my next address. Publius. Federalist No. 2 concerning dangers from foreign force and influence. For the Independent Journal, Wednesday, October 31st, 1787. To the people of the state of New York. When the people of America reflect they are now called upon to decide a question which, in its consequences, must prove one of the most important to ever engage their attention, the propriety of their taking a very comprehensive as well as a very serious view of it will be evident. Nothing is more certain than the indispensable necessity of government, and it is equally undeniable that whenever and however it is instituted, the people must see to it some of their natural rights in order to vest it with the requisite powers. It is well worthy of consideration, therefore, whether it would conduce more to the interest of the people of America that they should, to all general purposes, be one nation, under one federal government, or that they should divide themselves into separate confederacies, and to give the head of each the same kind of powers which they are advised to place in one national government. It has until lately been a received and uncontradicted opinion that the prosperity of the people of America depended on their continuing firmly united, and the wishes, prayers, and efforts of our best and wisest citizens have been constantly directed to that object. But politicians now appear who insist that this opinion is erroneous, and that instead of looking for safety and happiness in a union, we ought to seek it in a division of the states into distinct confederacies or sovereignties. However extraordinary this new doctrine may appear, it nevertheless has its advocates, and certain characters who were much opposed to it formerly are at present of the number. Whatever may be the arguments or inducements which have wrought this change in the sentiments and declarations of the gentlemen, it certainly would not be wise in the people at large to adopt these new political tenets without being fully convinced that they are founded in truth and sound policy. It has often given me pleasure to observe that independent America was not composed of detached and distant territories, but that one connected, fertile, wide-spreading country was the portion of our western sons of liberty. Providence has in a particular manner blessed it with a variety of soils and productions, and watered it with innumerable streams, for the delight and accommodation of its inhabitants. A succession of navigable water forms a kind of chain around its borders, as if to bind it together, while the most noble rivers in the world, running at convenient distances, present them with highways for the easy communication of friendly aids, and the mutual transportation and exchange for the various commodities. With equal pleasure, I have as often taken notice that Providence has been pleased to give this one connected country to one united people, a people descended from the same ancestors, speaking the same language, professing the same religion, attached to the same principles of government, very similar in their manners and customs, and who, by their joint counsels, arms, and efforts, fighting side by side throughout a long and bloody war, have nobly established a general liberty and independence. This country and this people seem to have been made for each other, and it appears as if it was the design of Providence, that an inheritance so proper and convenient for a band of brethren, united to each other by the strongest of ties, should never be split into a number of unsocial, jealous, and alien sovereignties. Similar sentiments have hitherto prevailed among all orders and denominations of men among us. To all general purposes, we have uniformly been one people, each individual citizen everywhere enjoying the same national rights, privileges, and protection. As a nation, we have made peace and war. As a nation, we have vanquished our common enemies. As a nation, we have formed alliances and made treaties and entered into various compacts and conventions with foreign states. A strong sense of the value and blessings of union induced by the people at the very early period to institute a federal government and preserve and perpetuate it. They formed it almost as soon as they had a political existence. Nay, at a time when their habitations were in flames, when many of the citizens were bleeding, and when the progress of hostility and desolation left little room for those calm and mature inquiries and reflections which must ever precede the formation of a wise and well-balanced government for a free people. It is not to be wondered at that a government instituted at times so inauspicious should on an experiment be found greatly deficient and inadequate to the purposes it was intended to answer. This intelligent people perceived and regretted these defects. Still coming no less attached to a union than enamored with liberty, they observed a danger which immediately threatened the former and more remotely the latter, and being persuaded the ample security of both could only be found in a national government more wisely framed, they, as with one voice, convened in a late convention in Philadelphia to take that important subject under consideration. This convention of men who proposed the confidence of the people, and many of whom had become highly distinguished by their patriotism, virtue, and wisdom, in times which the minds and hearts of men undertook their arduous task. In the mild season of peace, with minds unoccupied by other subjects, they passed many months in cool, uninterrupted, and daily consultation. And finally, without having been awed by power, or influenced by any passions except love for their country, they presented and recommended to the people the plan produced by their joint and very unanimous councils. Admit, for so it is the fact, that this plan is only recommended, not imposed, yet let it be remembered that it is neither recommended to blind approbation nor blind reprobation, but to the sedate and candid consideration which the magnitude and importance of the subject demand, and which it certainly ought to receive. But this, as was remarked in the foregoing number of this paper, is more to be wished than expected, that it may be so considered and examined. Experience on a former occasion teaches us not to be too sanguine in such hopes. It is not yet forgotten that a well-grounded apprehensions of imminent danger induced the people of America to form the memorable Congress of 1774. That body recommended certain measures to their constituents, and the event proved their wisdom, yet it is fresh in our memories how soon the press began to teem with pamphlets and weekly papers against those very measures. Not only many of the officers of government, who obeyed the dictates of personal interest, but others from a mistaken estimate of consequences, or the undue influence of former attachments, or whose ambition aimed at objects which did not correspond to the public good, were indefatigable in their efforts to persuade a people and reject the advice of a patriotic Congress. Many, indeed, were deceived and deluded, but the great majority of the people reasoned and decided judiciously, and happy they are in reflecting that they did so. They considered that the Congress was composed of many wise and experienced men, that, being convened from different parts of the country, they brought with them and communicated to each other a variety of useful information, that in the course of the time they passed together in inquiring into discussing the true interest of their country, they must have acquired very accurate knowledge of that head, that they were individually interested in public liberty and prosperity, and therefore that it was not less their inclination than their duty to recommend only such measures as, after the most mature deliberation, they really thought prudent and advisable. These and similar considerations then induced the people who rely greatly on the judgment and integrity of Congress. They took their advice, notwithstanding the various arts and endeavors used to deter them from it. But if the people at large had a reason to confide in the men of that Congress, few of whom had been fully tried or generally known, still greater reason have they now to respect the judgment and advice of that convention. For it is well known that some of the most distinguished members of that Congress, who have been since tried and justly approved for patriotism and abilities, and who have grown in acquiring political information, were also members of this convention, and carried into it their accumulated knowledge and experience. It is worthy of remark that not only the first, but every succeeding Congress, as well as the late convention, have invariably joined with the people in thinking that the prosperity of America depended on its union. To preserve and perpetuate it was the great object of the people in forming that convention, and it is also the great object of the plan which the convention has advised them to adopt. With that propriety, therefore, or for what good purposes, are attempts at this particular period made by some men to depreciate the importance of the Union? Or why is it suggested that 3 of the 4 confederacies would be better than 1? I am persuaded in my own mind that the people have always thought right on this subject, and that their universal and uniform attachment to the cause of the Union rests greatly on the weighty reasons, which I shall endeavor to develop and explain in some ensuing papers. They who promote the idea of subsisting a number of distinct confederacies in the room of the plan of the convention seem clearly to foresee that the rejection of it would put the continuance of the Union in utmost jeopardy. That certainly would be the case, and I sincerely wish that it may be as clearly foreseen by every good citizen that whenever the dissolution of the Union arrives, America will have reason to exclaim, in the words of the poet, "Farewell, a long farewell to my greatness." Publius. Federalist No. 3. The same subject continued, concerning dangers from foreign force and influence. For the Independent Journal, Saturday, November 3rd, 1787. To the people of the State of New York. It is not a new observation that the people of any country, if, like the Americans, intelligent and well-informed, seldom adopt and steadily persevere for many years in an erroneous opinion respecting their interests. That consideration naturally tends to create great respect for the high opinion which people of America have so long and uniformly entertained for the importance of their continuing firmly united under one federal government, vested with sufficient powers for all general and national purposes. The more attentively I consider and investigate the reasons which appear to have given birth to this opinion, the more I become convinced that they are cogent and conclusive. Among the many objects to which a wise and free people find it necessary to direct their attention, that of providing for their safety seems to be the first. The safety of the people doubtless has relation to the great variety of circumstances and considerations, and consequently affords great latitude to those who wish to define it precisely and comprehensively. At present, I mean only to consider it as it respects security for the preservation of peace and tranquility, as well as against dangers from foreign arms and influence, as from dangers of the like kind arising from domestic causes. As the former of these comes first in order, it is proper it should be the first discussed. Let us therefore proceed to examine whether the people are not right in their opinion that a cordial union under an efficient national government affords them the best security that can be devised against hostilities from abroad. The number of wars which have happened or will happen in the world will always be found to be in proportion to the number and weight of the causes, whether real or pretended, which provoke or invite them. If this remark be just, it becomes useful to inquire whether so many just causes of war are likely to be given by a united America as by a disunited America. For if it should turn out that a united America will probably give the fewest, then it will follow that in this respect the Union tends most to preserve the people in a state of peace with other nations. The just causes of war, for the most part, arise either from violation of treaties or from direct violence. America has already formed treaties with no less than 6 foreign nations, and all of them, except Prussia, are maritime, and therefore able to annoy and injure us. She also has extensive commerce with Portugal, Spain, and Britain, and, with respect to the two latter, has in addition the circumstance of neighborhood to attend to. It is of high importance to the peace of America that she observe the laws of nations towards all of these powers, and to me it appears evident that this will be more perfectly and punctually done by one national government than it could be either by 13 separate states or by 3 or 4 distinct confederacies. Because when once an efficient national government is established, the best men in the country will not only consent to serve, but also will generally be appointed to manage it. For although town and country, or contracted influence, may place men in state assemblies or senates or courts of justice or executive departments, yet more general and extensive reputation for talents and other qualifications will be necessary to recommend men for offices under national government, especially as it will have the widest field for choice, and never experience the want of proper persons, which is not uncommon in some of the states. Hence it will result that the administration, the political councils, the judicial decisions of the national government will be more wise, systemical, and judicious than those of individual states, and consequently more satisfactory with respect to other nations, as well as more safe with respect to us. Because, under the national government, treaties and articles of treaties, as well as laws of nations, will always be expounded in one sense and executed in the same manner, whereas adjudications of the same points and questions in 13 states or in 3 or 4 confederacies will not always accord or be consistent, and that, as well as from a variety of independent courts and judges appointed by different and independent governments, as from different local laws and interests which may affect and influence them. The wisdom of the Convention in committing such questions to the jurisdiction and judgment of courts appointed by and responsible only to one national government cannot be too much commended. Because the prospect of present loss or advantage may often tempt the governing party in 1 or 2 states to swerve from good faith and justice, but those temptations not reaching the other states and consequently having little or no influence on the national government, the temptation will be fruitless, and good faith and justice will be preserved. It is the case of the Treaty of Peace with Britain adds great weight to this reasoning, because even if a governing party in a state should be disposed to resist such temptations, yet as such temptations may, and commonly do, result from circumstances peculiar to the state, and may affect a greater number of its inhabitants, the governing party may not always be able, if willing, to prevent the injustice mediated, or to punish the aggressors. But the national government, not being affected by those local circumstances, will neither be induced to commit the wrong themselves, nor want power or inclination to prevent or punish its commission by others. So far, therefore, as either design or accidental violations of treaties and the laws of nations afford just causes of war, they are less to be apprehended under one general government than under several lesser ones, and in that respect the former favors the safety of the people. As to those just causes of war which proceed from direct and unlawful violence, it appears equally clear to me that one good national government affords vastly more security against dangers of that sort that can be derived from any other quarter. Because such violences are more frequently caused by the passions and interest of a part than of the whole, of one or two states than of the Union, not a single Indian war has yet been occasioned by aggressions of the present federal government, feeble as it is. But there are several instances of Indian hostilities having been provoked by the improper conduct of individual states, who, either unable or unwilling to restrain or punish offenses, have given occasion to the slaughter of many innocent inhabitants. The neighborhood of Spanish and British territories, bordering on some states and not on others, naturally confines the cause of quarrel more immediately to the borderers. The bordering states, if any, will be those who, under the impulse of sudden irritation, and a quick sense of apparent interest or injury, will be most likely, by direct violence, to excite war with these nations, and nothing can so effectually obviate that danger as a national government, whose wisdom and prudence will not be diminished by the passions which actuate the parties immediately interested. But not only fewer just causes of war will be given to the national government, but it will be more in their power to accommodate and settle them amicably. They will be more temperate and cool, and in that respect, as well as in others, will be more in capacity to act advisedly than the offending state. The pride of states, as well as men, naturally disposes them to justify their actions, and opposes their acknowledging, correcting, or repairing their errors and offenses. The national government, in such cases, will not be affected by this pride, but will proceed with moderation and candor to consider the decision on the means the most proper to extricate them from the difficulties which threaten them. Besides, it is well known that acknowledgments, explanations, and compensations are often accepted as satisfactory from a strong, united nation, which would be rejected as unsatisfactory if it offered by a state or confederacy of little consideration of power. In the year 1685, the state of Genoa, having offended Louis XIV, endeavored to appease him. He demanded that they send their doge, or chief magistrate, accompanied by 4 of their senators, to France, to ask his pardon and receive his terms. They were obliged to submit to it for the sake of peace. Would he, on any other occasion, either have demanded or received the like humiliation from Spain or Britain, or any of the other powerful nations? Publius.